Welcome to Behind the Build, the podcast where I interview architects, designers, and talk about their practice, them as an individual, their operations, their inspirations, really everything. And on today's episode, I have Beth Lowenfeld, a dear friend who runs the practice 4 Blocks South. Beth, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So Beth, I want to start off with the basic question. When did you start your practice?
So I started in the interior design industry with my own business in 2010.
Okay.
But the business I own now was started in 2015.
In 2015, okay.
Yes. To elaborate on
Yeah, I'm like, you see my eyes. I'm like, well, tell me more.
Okay, so in 2010, I was working at Fair and Ball. And I was managing their showroom and I was giving talks on color. And I started to have clients come in and ask me questions about things that did not relate to paint. And they, over the course of a few years of working there, started to really encourage me to go out on my own and to start to do work on the side for them. And ultimately, it allowed me the capacity and the desire and I guess the guts to be able to go out on my own. So in 2010, I did that. And I was working by myself under a company called Hue Home & Color. It was very small and it was mainly focused on decorating and paint color selection. And believe me, there's quite an industry actually in paint color selection.
I believe that.
Yes. People don't want to get it wrong. It's an expensive mistake. So I was doing that for a while and it started to get into larger and larger decorating projects. But I wasn't loving working by myself and I hadn't quite sort of found the flow of being a solopreneur explicitly because you have to wear so many hats. And for me, the creative process needs to involve other people. So in 2015, I decided to branch out and was looking to actually open a retail side of my business because I obviously also had a background in retail, having worked at Fair and Ball for several years.
Yep.
And so I created 4 Blocks South with a business partner and I folded my interior design industry business into that.
Yep.
And then we opened the store arm. And we did that for a few years, but retail in the luxury home goods market is also not an easy thing to tackle. Especially now. I'm actually very grateful that I am no longer in that part of the business.
Yep. Carrying at least through COVID would have been a potential issue.
It could have been a massive issue. And so the long story short on that is that the retail side folded coincidentally with the birth of my second child, and we folded the retail part and I went back to just doing design. But by that point we had employees and I kept the employees and ended up actually finding an exceptional employee who's now my right-hand lady in the business. And so now 4 Blocks South is fully focused on all aspects of residential building and interior design.
And can we name drop that employee?
Her name is Leah. She is wonderful. Can't do it without her.
Yeah, and I hear her name all the time on calls.
Yeah.
Or about her all the time on calls. Okay, so in 2015, you officially start 4 Blocks South, the interior design firm.
Yes.
Okay. And what does that look like at the time? How many employees do you have?
So we had, we always sort of had a minimum of 4 people in the office and they were doing a mix of things. Some were working more on retail, some were working exclusively on interior design. And I was always leading the interior design and I was helping with the procurement and the selection of products for the retail. That part sort of coincided also with doing much more substantial building projects. So we started to get into full scale renovations. I flipped a couple of houses for myself and that taught me a lot, and worked on some new build projects as well. So there was a lot of learning experience on the fly, but it taught me a lot. It was sort of baptism by fire. And so Leah and I worked almost exclusively together on the residential design part for a couple of years, and then we added back in some additional employees after that. So we've been a maximum of 6. Right now we're 5.
Okay. And is everyone local?
No, everyone is not local.
Okay.
Leah is local. I'm local. Colin is also local. And then we have one employee who's based in Goderich, and she's focused on fabric and furnishing side of things. And then we actually have an employee who's now based in the Netherlands who's working on all kinds of back-end design as well.
Interesting. And these things are, these things change all the time, but
Yes.
that alone is something to have remote employees.
Yeah. So, okay, that has been an interesting challenge for sure as part of this business,
Right.
because I think that historically, the experience of creating has been, it's been sort of together, right? People are expecting to sort of collaborate within the office. And, Leah was a driving force in the idea of being remote. And she was sort of ahead of the curve before COVID, because she had 2 young kids at the time when she started with the 4 Blocks South when we had the retail arm. And, she wanted to be working from home because she needed that in terms of her lifestyle. And so it just sort of set us up right away to be able to figure out systems that allowed us to collaborate remotely. And, with the changes in the business, folding the retail arm and stuff like that, I wanted to stay kind of small. I was a little bit gun shy. I kind of didn't want to go back into something really large and expansive and make too many investments, because frankly, there was a lot to sort of recuperate from after closing the retail side of things. Right. So we learned quickly how to collaborate remotely, and then it was easier to bring people in to the fold because we already had some systems in place for that. Luckily, that set us up for a lot of success right away as COVID hit, because we did not have to figure out how to do things from a distance.
Right.
So, we had a very successful COVID, in large part because we were already ready for some of the stuff that was thrown our way for that. And because of the way we've already started working together, we really understood, what our respective strengths were. And we were able to sort of pick up the slack where was required when things got really hectic with all of the COVID madness, which was not small.
Yeah, I think we had a project together during COVID.
We sure did.
Give me a moment as I just think about, because what you've kind of said indirectly through all of that was that you're not leading the charge on everything here. Indirectly, you've said that. You've alluded to the openness to take advice from the people that work essentially for you.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And steer your business in a path that you think makes sense based on their recommendations. And so part of the pause at the beginning of that, of where I'm about to go with this, was just to kind of absorbing that, because in many scenarios of sole practitioners starting a business, they are very intensive in their desire to want to run the business their way. And they are not so open to feedback from employees and direction from employees on how to make the business as successful as it can be. So where am I going with my question? I think I'm more of just making a statement of what I see. Why do you feel that is an appropriate way to run your business?
Well, I mean, it's like living in society, right? I mean, there's no monopoly on the right way to do something. And the way I look at something is not the way that someone else looks at something. And, we're building for people. People are all people are different. Their needs are different. Their desires are different. Yeah. How they approach a project is different. So I don't have a monopoly on how to solve that. And I think my biggest value add to a project is that I am a conduit. I intuit and interpret what people need. And I have to figure out through their communication styles how to best approach their project. So we don't have any one studio style. Every project is totally unique to the client. And, for that reason, we need to be very adaptable. I think, I've learned a lot from that. My employees add a lot of value in that, because, sometimes they'll see things that I don't see. Sometimes they'll hear things that I don't hear. And together, we're listening, we're a chorus of listeners, and we're able to really absorb what's required, and together, put all the pieces together like a puzzle and really present something that ultimately I think ends up being very successful. I mean, I'm really proud of our process in that regard, because we really strive to make the clients happy, and overall, knock on wood, been very successful in that regard, because we are looking at it from every angle. And, my strengths are very much project management. Leah's super creative. That doesn't mean that I'm not involved in the daily design stuff. I absolutely am. But Leah's extremely creative. And for that reason, she's our design director. And some of the other people that are working in the background have, strengths because of years of talent and experience. Like the person that I mentioned in Goderich, ironically also named Beth, has 30 years in the fabric industry, right? I can't beat that, and nor do I want to. I want to play up those strengths, and she brings so much exceptional value to all of the furniture sourcing that we have. My employee Elizabeth, apparently we only hire Beths in this company. The one in the Netherlands, she does fantastic work and is, really avant-garde in her thinking with regards to interior design. So, sometimes she'll present ideas that, I would never have thought of. And I think it's exceptional where that leads us in terms of the end result for each project. They're totally unique and they're really exciting.
Right. And would you say that you are married to a certain style of design, or are you open?
I am open within reason. I'm proud of the fact that we don't have a studio style. To me, every project is different, and that's part of what makes it exciting. I want to understand what makes clients tick. I mean, fortunately, we're not doing small projects. We tend to get, large scale renovations. They involve the whole house, and typically that means a multi-year project. And, most of the time it involves both construction and furniture. So we're there replacing the last pillow on the last piece of furniture kind of thing. And, when you're working on a project for several years, you really get to know the people that you're working with and working for. And so, to me, it's exciting to be able to start that process, understand what makes them tick, and to create something unique. It's just like art. Every piece should be unique, and I'm not interested in repeating ideas. In fact, we try really hard not to repeat ideas and not to reuse materials on purpose.
And do you use multiple types of color, or are you finding, and I say this because of the history with Farrow & Ball, you've got this amazing background of knowledge of colors and how they complement each other and don't complement each other.
Yep.
So in your design, are you color oriented or are you shade oriented?
Well, in my own personal preference would be color oriented, because I think life is too short to live in black and white personally. And I think COVID really taught us that, when people had to spend a lot of time in beige, bland environments, it was taxing on them emotionally and psychologically. So there is real evidence behind why color is good for you. And I am definitely a proponent of that. And it has a lot to do with lighting too. I think lighting is a really critical part of the success of design and also the way that people experience space. And that comes back to color. So, for sure I vote for color. That doesn't mean that we can't successfully do things in shades. In fact, some of our, most liked projects have been things that we've done in the more neutral or black and white palette. And I'm super proud of those things. And, part of what's been enjoyable about that is kind of having my limits pushed a little bit, because the clients made a very clear request. It's not necessarily how I would have initially started it, but the end result, we got to some really unique, interesting, special homes, and they're not just houses, they're homes. Like, I think that's the thing to me that's the most enjoyable about what I do, is that at the end of the day, the sort of resounding feedback we get is like, wow, this is amazing. This is my home. You took what I thought in little bits and pieces and I couldn't fully articulate in words, and you made it into something real. And that's an amazing thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Take that Pinterest board.
Yeah.
Right.
A bunch of different brain farts and turn it into something cool.
Yep. Yeah. I haven't done that yet on the podcast. So when you're looking at scales of project, is there a limitation to the size of a project? So let's say it was, a bathroom. Would you look at a bathroom, or are you more focused on larger scale projects at this point?
At this point, we're focused on larger scale projects, because there's also, I've learned that when I take on a project, I am all in. The client gets very close access to me, and I'm going to be very responsive, and I'm thinking about it all the time. So you're going to end up paying me a heck of a lot of money to just do your bathroom. And so I just don't think that it's a value add that we're presenting for something that is that small.
Right.
And, frankly, I think we can make much more of an impact on something larger, because there's more opportunity to do things, together with the client, but also to play with materials, to play with color, to play with light, all the things that I think sort of come in our arsenal that we are able to execute on successfully. You can only do that to a certain extent in a small space like a bathroom. Right.
And to the point you made within that dialogue, I remember on the project that we were working on together where you overlooked your own birthday.
I did.
To facilitate a client.
Yeah.
And the client noticed that.
Well, amazing clients in that regard. And so that's, I guess, another thing that I'm proud of, having worked in the industry now for, pretty much 20 years in one way, shape, or form, is that I have managed to sort of figure out who the right clients are for me. Because again, for us, it's a multi-year adventure together, and I want us to get along. I want to set it up for success for everybody involved and for the process to be enjoyable. Because at the end of the day, we're working on people's, we're often working on their dream homes, and we're regularly working on people's biggest investment, right? And I don't take that lightly. So, and it's a stressful process. And you got to like who you're working with, because there's going to be a lot of communication. There are going to be some stressful moments. Yep. And if you don't build that on a foundation of good communication and frankly chemistry, it's not successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty much exactly how it is. Yeah. It is largely a marriage.
Absolutely.
So when you're going and you're being interviewed in your sales process, and a client sitting across from you, do you ever in that process recognize that someone may or may not be for you? Or do you tell them that you might not be the right fit? Has that ever happened?
I've definitely had those moments where I'm like, we're not meant for each other here. Yeah. How I say it depends. Sometimes those clients still really want to work with me despite my best efforts at sort of saying, I think I'm not the right fit for you. I try really hard to let them down gently. That's never a moment I want to be in. Every time I meet someone, I'm very hopeful that it's going to be, a great experience, because fundamentally for me, it's about people, right? This is a business of relationships, and I enjoy that. And I think that's what makes it interesting and exciting, because every project's different, and learning about people, ultimately these people become my friends. When it's really good, it's really good. And man, there's some interesting people out there, so yeah, I have gotten to a point now where fortunately I am able to say no when it's not right, but also I've learned to trust my instincts when it's not right, because it's, even if it felt like I should take it, if it really doesn't feel like we're aligned, I know in the end it's not worth the trouble.
Right. Yeah, and then that's completely fair. So over the course of the last 9 years of the current operation running, what have been scales of projects that you've gotten into, and what have those how have those relationships with clients, how have they grown? Yeah, how have they grown?
So
it's a little bit of an abstract question, I know that.
The thing is, okay, it's like most of the projects are either full house renovation, so basement to second floor or third floor, or they're new builds of a minimum of like 5,000 square feet, I would say. And again, they mostly encompass both all the construction related materials as well as furnishing. So I would say the shortest project's probably about a year all told, a smaller scale renovation. Interestingly, I took on it was a 3-floor renovation with it wasn't even an extension. It was a small project. I finished it relatively recently, and it was smaller than anything I'd taken on right away. But it ended up that the couple that owned the house were, just two of the coolest people I'd ever met. The wife and I were so similar. We could finish each other's sentences. And so it was just such a rewarding project. So, is there something too small? Yes, a bathroom's too small. But again, for the right clients in the right situation, that house, the work was really only like 3,000 square feet. It was one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever done.
Right. I guess in some ways also you'd look at those types of smaller projects. If it was a scenario where there was a repeat client and they were saying like, can you come and look at this for us? We want to redesign our bathroom. You're like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because ultimately, and I've said this on another episode, is the time that it takes and the mental and physical drain of going through all of the detail for something that is solely a bathroom can be an equivalent to designing a house in many ways.
Yes.
Now, I know that the drawing, the package that you're going to get and everything else is going to be far more reduced. There's not as many pages, but it takes up a lot of mental space.
Yeah. And
it takes up your work, your time at work, when you could be potentially, missing opportunities in other projects. What I haven't asked you yet, and I've waited. Why 4 blocks south?
So I wish I could take credit for that, but that was my old business partner, and I lived 4 blocks south from her. And we were looking for something that would allow us to expand the retail arm across North America. Yeah. We wanted something that felt, urban, but somewhat residential, like it related to home, but in a more urban environment, because the products we were selling were, geared more towards more contemporary spaces, slightly more urban spaces. And I'm really, in retrospect, I'm so glad that I went through that whole experience, because it allowed me I was sourcing in places that were very different from what was available at the time in Canada. So I was going all over Europe sourcing stuff. I found some amazing brands, one of which I was the first person to bring to Canada, and now is hugely successful in North America. It's called Rebel Walls. It's a wallpaper. Really cool stuff. And some other Danish brands, Swedish brands that were smaller and now have become really big. I found some of those things before they really had a foothold in North America, and it was such a cool experience. I mean, I'm going on a tangent here. It doesn't really answer your question about the name, but the goal was to do things that were residential but urban related. That's what the name stood for. And the experience of having the store allowed me to really expand on that knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny that you went there, because one of my next questions was going to be, how do you source some of the leading products that exist in the market? Because we've worked together, mm-hmm. and some of the specs that you're putting out through your packages are in
weird.
Many ways, sometimes something that hasn't necessarily been done before,
yeah,
or that has been done many times before. Let's say there's a 1-off or a 2-off. 2-off, yeah, I said a 2-off. How are you gaining your product knowledge on new technologies, new product, new equipment, all of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's kind of coming from all over. And to a great extent, I'm relying on my team for that too, because they're, based on their personal interests, their own explorations. All of us like to travel. All of us, are really sort of actively involved in looking at different things online. And we're reading different things too that then bring us to other resources. So we're all very curious, and we have weekly meetings where we bring some of this new stuff to the table. We always start every project too with a big, very fulsome Pinterest board of our own relating to some of what the clients have shown us initially. So, some of those things they come from strange places, places we're not accustomed to sourcing. And so we'll either tweak what the thing is and make it locally ourselves, or we'll see about who's making whatever it is we found. And then, see if there are people locally who are doing the same thing. Because, if you really dig deep enough, you can find people that are interested in the same things you are. And, like microcement. We were just talking about microcement. I mean, obviously that's quite ubiquitous now, but we've been using it for a while and we loved it. And, actually Toronto has a few excellent artisans in the field of microcement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. The reason we were talking about this is the application on the fireplace in my house. And we're looking to apply it in a few different projects. So, and what about technologies? Like, well, I guess the reason I'm asking this is because, while I've already mentioned you bring it up in some of the packages that you have, you seem to know about some products, like you just mentioned when you were traveling to Europe and you looked at, it was called Rebel Walls, mm-hmm. Right? So are you going on trips, and are you getting education from suppliers and vendors to be able to gain this knowledge as a result of the meetings you're having internally? Or is information additionally coming to you from suppliers and vendors? Or is it solely just internally because people have different interests? You're getting that information, you're getting that knowledge, and now you're going out and finding out more about it.
All three. I mean, I think the other part is that just like with the clients, when I meet people I want to work on their stuff. When we find vendors that we like, we really foster those relationships. And sometimes it pushes both of us to work together to create something new. I mean, my mill worker is a perfect example of that. We built furniture with him. We've done all kinds of interesting, weird, creative things just in terms of cabinetry. It's hard to get excited about doing weird cabinetry, but we can,
It's appropriate. This is the right forum for that.
And, so he provides a lot in bouncing the ideas around. Just being able to have open dialogue allows us to create new things. I was traveling a lot when I had the store. I had 2 very young kids. after that, so, and then there was COVID, obviously, so it really inhibited travel. But I regularly travel to New York. I'd like to start going and sourcing in Europe again, and smaller shows too, not just Maison and Objet or the Milan Furniture Fair. There are really interesting small shows out there where you can find totally niche stuff, in particular in Scandinavia, which to me is a really interesting source of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where I found Rebel Walls as an example.
In Scandinavia?
Yeah.
Did you stay in anything particularly interesting while you were there? Because I know that Scandinavian design is quite something.
Yeah. So now you're making me dig deep. I did stay in a really cool old vintage hotel in Copenhagen, the name of which totally escapes me, but it was like fully stuck in the 70s. And it was really interesting because, now you're experiencing mid-century modern and well, it would have been in the 60s, really. Mid-century modern firsthand, like real vintage pieces in hotel rooms. It was really exceptional to sort of witness how the entire structure was designed around that stuff.
And now talking about the structure and the architecture, we've talked about some of the products and specs, and we've talked about clients. What we have not talked about is the process that you have for engaging a client from the point of inception and taking their inspiration boards, let's say, or their Pinterest boards, whatever we want to call it, but let's say inspiration boards, and then bringing that forward to them in a meaningful way in the beginning to be able to get people on side with what the vision is for their project. And I say this because the quality of what one can put out can really, really help or hinder a project. So what does the process look like for you with clients when you're trying to get them to understand what you're now trying to bring forward or bring back to them?
Well, it really starts a lot with conversation. I think every project starts with multiple lengthy conversations. And I know a lot of my colleagues in the industry would say that it has to start with a paid consultation. And I was doing that for a very long time. But now for the scale of projects that we're doing, and again, because I take those relationships so seriously, and I'm kind of like, it's not fair to the client to pay me if we just don't have a fit. I'm willing to put in a few hours of time to sit down with you on Zoom, maybe even come to your house, meet you firsthand, and see if we hit it off. And if we do, from there, we quickly get into a contract discussion. We have a proposal for fees, and we're asking them for a lot of information from them up front. It doesn't have to be organized. It's just like, do you have architectural plans? Do you have your builder? Send me any inspiration you've amassed. Is it on Pinterest? It could be, screenshots from your phone. I don't really care. You can give me things you've torn out of a magazine, and we'll take all that information, which is generally, a big mess of ideas that they can't really articulate, and we'll sort through it as a group internally. And then from there, we do an initial meeting where we've sort of culled their ideas. We'll say, okay, this is kind of what we understood as the overall vibe. And then it's up to me to try and put words to that. And I think, that's my role. I'm the main client liaison in our firm, and that is one of my strengths, is being able to try and articulate it.
You said it again. You said our firm, not mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, but it's true, because I can't do it without them, and I don't want to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, but I mean, like that, and that's the honest to God's truth, is that I realized that very quickly when I had Hue Home and Color. I didn't want to do it by myself. It's not enjoyable for me to do it. I can't be an island doing this.
I get it. Sorry, I completely interrupted your train of thought.
Well, you didn't though, because it's critical to how we do it, because we always have these meetings as a group. Yeah. And so I'm putting words to things that we've created together as a team. And then from there, we'll also show the client other things that we've pulled together that we feel sort of helps to make a more cohesive version of what they initially brought to us. Maybe is, some ideas that they didn't, perhaps explore on their own. Yeah. And that can help us to then guide the project in a direction that we feel is representative of what they're trying to achieve, but also is sort of aligned with what we think is an executable vision.
And then do you find that you are pushing the clients when you present your first presentation?
Interesting.
Present your first presentation.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of presentations in our presentations. That's the thing. So we go through what we call white boxing, or we do a series of mini presentations, often, again, because the volume of information that has to be absorbed is so huge. We'll break it into more digestible pieces, and we'll start to brainstorm with the clients in smaller pieces, and then bring it all together at the end. So by the time we get to the real presentation, often they've seen a lot of what we're showing them, but it also ends up resulting in very few revisions because we're kind of already there, and it helps us on the creative path. It makes sure we're not wasting too much time, and it makes sure that, basically all the presentations we do are successful. That doesn't mean that it's not okay for a client to say, I don't like that. In fact, I strongly encourage it, but I try and encourage it more at the beginning so that we're not getting it wrong towards the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And having to undo what
I'm not interested. Yes, I am not. I don't do that. I will not do that. I'm not interested in putting anyone through that. And as all my trades know, they will not wait for me to fix something on site. It will get fixed right away. And that's super important to me. And I want to avoid those problems.
So to that point, what does it look like from your standpoint in terms of the number of projects that you'll take on at a time? Are you open to being unlimited? How does that work for you?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I think I try to be discerning on what I take on because they tend to be larger, and I'm the main point person going to site and stuff like that. So
what's your capacity?
Yeah, exactly. What is my capacity? Questionable sometimes. I mean, I think if the right project comes along, I'm not going to say no to that.
Right.
And it's going to depend to a great extent of where we're at with our other projects, because I also don't want to say yes to something and then sacrifice on other stuff, because I really take those relationships seriously, and I want to make sure that, we deliver on what we promised. But, life is an adventure. I am always open to new opportunities because you just don't know what can unfold from that, and I think that's the best part about what we do. It's such a huge opportunity in terms of what you can create, who you can meet, and the personal relationships you can build. It's so, so fulfilling. And so if you meet the right people, you have to go for it.
Yeah. Life's
too short.
Yeah. So let's talk about the people that help make you who you are outside of your practice. Family. What is the family dynamic for you?
My family, so my husband, Colin, works with me in the business, and he's an excellent project manager, and he's very, very proficient at all operational stuff. So we're working together, and, that absolutely is fantastic. It also has some deterrence in it, like we are always together, for better, for worse. Yeah. And we have 2 kids, and, but what this has sort of allowed us to do is to really be present for our kids, which I think is awesome. My parents were both really successful business people, and that set an amazing example for me, but they weren't around all that much, and I wanted to make sure that I did it differently. And so, yeah, I mean, it's great. We work from home. There are some pros and cons to that too, and I am a bit of a workaholic. Yes. Yeah, didn't know that one.
I mean, no one else might have known that outside of like you and I and those that you currently work with and have worked for and are working for now. But for those that are listening, that's accurate.
Yes, that is accurate. Yeah, and it's maybe to the disappointment sometimes of my children. But, I do like that sometimes when I get inspired, I can go and like get it out. Yeah. And I don't want to have to leave because something happened. So again, we were set up for success because this was sort of the way that the business got built anyway. COVID was easy in that regard.
Right.
And, now I feel like I figured out more or less how to manage it all and be able to close the door on it at the end of the day for the most part.
Right. Although the office is down the hall.
The office is down the hall, but I do close the door on it.
And we have been on phone calls where sometimes you close the door on others.
Yes. And then they knock incessantly and rattle the door. Yeah. Now. Yeah.
I apologize. See, Beth and I have now known each other for a number of years. And so in part of my own excitement about having had her on to discuss all of this was maintaining professionalism at all times, because sometimes our conversations are not quite so professional.
No.
And we joke around a lot and we have fun with things. But at the same time, we're also collectively, we're building very, very incredible projects together.
Yeah.
And I think that you, the listener, get a sense of that from hearing the way that she describes her business and the way she describes herself as an individual. So what I have not touched on at all, because Beth is also very humble about this, is that in the years that she's run her practice, I'm going to put you on the spot with this one. Now you're highly anticipating what's coming out of my mouth. And that is, how many awards have you now won?
We've won some awards.
Yeah.
We have some. Yeah, we won some awards.
The blush.
Yeah, you can see it through the waves. Yeah. We've won some awards. I think that is a testament to how hard we work, but how much we love what we do.
I agree.
And again, being able to connect with the right clients to make something really special. And what I am most proud of is that word home. It's not a residence. It's not a structure. It's home. And I think that translates in our photography, and it definitely translates in the reviews that we get from clients. And that is just, to be able to do that for someone is such an honor, a privilege. And if I'm really successful, like the reviews that we get at the end of the day, that I am high for days after I get that feedback.
Do you allocate? This is actually a question I haven't asked anyone. Do you allocate any of your budget towards marketing at all?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, we have a pretty significant. We like to photograph most of the projects we do.
Well, I feel like photographing. Sorry, but not to cut you off there, but I feel like photography is slightly different.
Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because we bring in exceptional stylists, and we're fortunate to work with some of the best in the city, and I would argue in Canada, me and Mo, they're wonderful, and they can help bring a vision to the project, make it translate even more through the photography. But the photography isn't, that's not a small investment when it's all told. It's time, it's money. And the photography is really what sells the work, right? Leah and I often joke, we take photographs to get new projects, to take photographs to get new projects. That's how it works. And that's not a small allocation of funds when you factor in the size and the quantity of projects that we're photographing. Yep. We do work with a social media person. I'm not, as it might not appear like this, I'm quite private. I don't like to share a lot of my life.
You've done very well for an introvert and extrovert.
Thank you. So, we have relied on someone for that, and that has helped us more than anything, just to be able to do it consistently, because it's not natural for me to go to a job site and think about posting about it. I'll take the pictures, but I'm not necessarily thinking about what to say. Yeah. And obviously Instagram is critical for businesses like ours. And, beyond that, we have explored print, but it hasn't been something that I thought was really worthwhile. Right.
So the majority of what you're looking at for the growth and the continuation of the business is largely based on referrals.
Absolutely.
Your website.
But it's really
validate.
The website. So the photography is critical both on Instagram, Pinterest, and on the website. And people will go there, but ultimately all of our jobs are referral based.
Right.
And so by the time they've gotten to any of those sources I just listed, they've either talked at length with a friend about it, or we've already spoken as well, and they've gone back to sort of validate whatever we've discussed.
And have any of your references ever discussed with a prospective client the documentation you provide on a...
You mean like the foot-high stack of paper I provided to our most recent project? Good question. I don't know.
I'm just wondering, like, because I know as a builder, you appreciate all the detail that comes in a package that's like 600 pages with an index. And
actually, yeah, it was more than that. As the poor project manager on that project would attest to, there is a lot of documentation. Yeah.
Because, there is an unfortunate thinking with some people to think that an interior designer fluffs pillows.
But goes shopping. Yeah.
And goes shopping for products without understanding that the interior designer is actually helping to bring the architecture to life if done the right way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so I say that because when you receive a package of 600 or 700 pages, that's been worked on for months, it takes a long time to absorb that, but also you're bringing to life all of the conversations that you've mentioned already, all of the thought that you've gone through with your team, the procurement of all of the materials and details, and you bring that forward into a package to execute on a construction. And largely from our experience, and I'm trying really to stay away from us, but I'm somehow doing it here, but it generally relates to less changes through the course of construction because you've pulled so much out from the client.
Yes. Yes. So I think I said this already. I am a conduit for their needs.
Yeah.
So I am an interpreter of what they're trying to achieve. And it's not uncommon. I mean, if I were to go into a doctor's office, I can explain in vague detail my complaint, but I'm relying on them to take this weird combination of words and tell me what's wrong. I'm doing the same thing in this case. And by having those conversations in-depthly upfront, really getting to understand what makes people tick, we can create something very successful. We can put a tremendous amount of detail in it. And hopefully we've asked basically all the questions possible to provide the builders with what they need to do it quickly, efficiently. And I mean this like, we drill down to like the tile's made of this, it's this thick, it comes from this place, it's not rectified, this is the layout, here's the grout size, blah, blah, blah. Everything is really we try to drill it down to that level of detail so that it's basically a Bible for the project. And the other part of it is then if there's a problem after or there's a question after, we try and make sure that we're constantly accessible to be able to problem solve in real time. Because, building is not linear. There are always things that come up. Site conditions will have to change things. So we will make tweaks as they're required. But for the most part, if the questions were asked properly at the beginning, it can result in very few changes in the long run.
Right. And what are you looking for in terms of direction for your practice at this stage of your career?
Funny, I just had a meeting with Leah about this yesterday.
In advance of this podcast?
Yeah.
To ask that question?
Well, yeah, it's I think my goal is to work on more larger projects, fewer of them, because I think they provide different opportunities. I think, I would be interested in working in new locales. Right now, I work primarily in Toronto, or, the surrounding area. As you know, I like to be able to walk to my projects. Not a fan of driving. I picked the wrong career for that. But there have been
Flying cars.
Perfect.
Boeing actually just said that.
Did they?
By 2030, Boeing plans to have a flying car.
Oh,
good for them.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Doesn't relate entirely to this, but go ahead.
I feel like they don't have a good track record.
No, they don't.
I'm not sure I'm going to get in that flying car. But yeah, so I mean, I think being able to work in other locations is definitely a challenge that I'm interested in. Because the geography also dictates to a great extent how we approach a project. I mean, that's a huge consideration when you think about what you're building.
Yeah.
So I'd relish that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, that makes good, clear sense. Are you thinking like Canada or are you thinking beyond?
Both.
Okay.
The times I've traveled to tropical locations, I have felt very, very inspired. Again, because of color. The way that color and light interacts in those environments compared to here is really, really different. And I would just love to be able to have the opportunity to play with that palette. So, if that opportunity arose, I'd be really curious. I'd be interested in working a place like Newfoundland.
Yeah.
The geography there is really tantalizing. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's also going to come down to who the clients are and where they want to go,
The clients.
Yeah.
The clients are everything.
The clients are everything.
Yeah. Beth, I got to say, thank you so much for joining. It has been enlightening. It's been a pleasure to have you on as a friend, but as a collaborator in this industry, you have definitely helped bring a number of projects that we've been on to life in a way that we only hoped that we could. You've pushed us, and I know that anyone who's listening will definitely appreciate what you've had to share, because you bring so much to this industry, and there are so many people in it, and it's a pleasure to be able to know some of the bright ones. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear, and it's always a pleasure, sitting down and talking to you, and also working with you and your amazing team. Thank you.
Welcome.